I want to talk Yeezy.
Yeezy
Yeezy
season
season.
approaching.
Yeezy season. Uh,
Yes.
where
So
do you want to
this
start here?
podcast,
Take it away. I want to hear from you.
yeah, on this podcast, sometimes we try to do things and,
True.
success. But one thing we usually attempt to do is talk about a brand, is highlight a brand and talk about them. And maybe say something interesting if we're
Mhm.
lucky. And I wanted to talk about Yeezy season, the brand by the artist formerly known as Kanye West, in part because he and I divorced. We're divorced now.
Right. Right.
Not talk. And, sad. It's sad to see him go, but I loved watching him leave. I think that since Ye is kind of like lost all of his credit, his social credibility, that his brand, whether it exists, and I can include all of the tendrils, like I include Adidas, and I
Yeah.
include the kind of in this language. I think fundamentally has lost any of the cachet that it might have had when it was the brand of like the most trendy and one of the most popular musicians on earth. He's now makes bad albums and says bad words.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have any of that anymore. So stripped of that, hypothetically, what are we left with? And I wanted to talk about it in part because for a while, the kind of the consensus among critics or
Mhm.
whoever, the internet, was Yeezy season is a brand that's luxury-ish, and it was tapping into streetwear, but most people argued that it was derivative or it was
Mhm.
not that cool or interesting, and it was only really relevant because it had Kanye's name attached to it.
Right.
So now that it doesn't, I want to know, why do I still keep seeing it around? And
Mm.
not just Yeezy season, really, but I mean like clearly kind of like clones or things that are very similar.
The Yeezy aesthetic, right?
Yes,
So
the
I'm
aesthetic.
I'm so I'm so glad that you started there because now I really think you can look back on it and almost remove Ye. Like just say, Ye, he screwed it up.
Yay.
He's an
Yeah.
idiot. Let's just forget him. And now that you've written him off, you can look back and say, was Yeezy season, were any of the seasons as bad as the critics said? Were they better? Like, how do you feel when you look
Was it
back?
good? Yeah.
Yeah.
You,
Was
you mean
Yeezy good, actually? What do you think?
I want to confess some bias that I have, if you
Okay,
don't mind.
please.
I've been looking at fashion for a while. I know all the things that you're supposed to know.
I know all the
Uh,
things, okay?
I do. I know all of the things.
Mhm.
Uh, I was always kind of partial to that design, to those clothes. I always kind of was like, I would like that. I would
Me
wear
too.
that. And maybe it's because I'm boring. I mean, I kind of have a thing of wearing the same like t-shirt or sweatshirt, not the same one, a duplicate of guys,
Right,
but
right.
like wearing kind of like the same bland, like basic clothing every day. There was something really kind of immediately appealing to me about
Mhm,
that stuff, about like the idea of like luxurious streetwear that is very monochromatic and
mhm,
very minimal. And I'm conflicted. I was at least immediately conflicted because I
mhm.
recognize that it's like that's not really bold. And
No.
sometimes
Yeah,
when I think about like if it either is clothes or art or whatever, if my immediate reaction is I like it and it's not challenging me in any way, it
mhm.
might be lame. It might be
Right.
passe
It
because
might be
it's like,
like lowest common denominator stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But here's what I'm wondering. Looking back, and maybe I can bring like this page back up. Probably from seasons 1 through at least 3, like it at its most early on was I think when you were most likely to hear the it's derivative
Hmm.
criticism. And when I look back on it, I'm curious if you were to look at this, what do people feel like it's derivative of? I mean, obviously, Rick is the first thing that's always brought up.
Yes, Rick. But also, everybody was derivative of Rick at that time.
Right.
It it immediately rings like this is big Helmet Lang vibes to me. Like
Yeah.
if you look at his old shows, like
Yeah.
the warehouse, the kind of vibe, the
And
way
like
that they
the
look,
like fishtail parka type.
the fishtail parkas, there's a lot about it that is very Helmet Lang, but
Yeah.
also if you do look back at those collections, none of them exactly looked like this. So it's kind of it is whatever. I don't think it's a one for one.
Yeah.
I think it's a derivative of Rick and other kind of dark avant-garde
Yeah, Hyder
designers.
Ackerman got called out in the chat.
Hyder Ackerman got called out in the chat. But also, I think that there's a lot. Like, I think Hyder Ackerman was a source for a lot of this stuff, like the 2015 era close.
Right.
But I can understand kind of the lens where you're like, well, this is just the biggest star in the world. Kind of taking away from other designers who are trying to do something interesting, and he's doing something that they perceive as being boring. But the other thing that I included in the doc that we use is like I ask my audience, are you familiar with the brand Entire Studios?
Entire Studios.
So they are, as I've understood it, as I've been told, Entire Studios is a brand started by two former Yeezy season designers. And what they're making is Yeezy season by a different name.
Yeah.
And frankly, you know, and maybe this is just my bias. Maybe this is just me obsessing over this because I look at this stuff and I go, I want to buy some of these pieces. Maybe it's a price. Maybe it's because it's simple and I have to keep things simple in order for my simple brain to understand it. But it just looks like I just like the silhouette. I like the way that they look like they're cut and fit and probably will feel.
Yeah.
And I think the price point is reasonable. And to me, these are some like shapes and silhouettes and like kind of colors that I'm actually interested in incorporating. And I'm kind of like I'm grateful that Entire Studios that these designers decided to do this. Another example,
absurdly attractive price for this piece.
I'm so hot. I'm so turned on,
right?
Thinking about it. And yeah, I mean, frankly, that's not a bad price. Maybe I'll need to pick one of these up to determine because
that would actually be a great. Yeah, I'd be curious.
That would be if you give me the money, I'll do it.
Got you, baby. Penny, you know
yeah, but I'd like one of the other things I want to say is like if you've ever like gone to a boutique and you saw like a Yeezy season, the luxury fashion piece, it was very nice. It was very well made, and it was priced accordingly. If this Entire Studio stuff is similar, I think that is a good price for that thing. Maybe it's not revolutionary, but not everything needs to be, and it's not necessarily lowest common denominator or ugly, just being that. I had another point. I don't know if you want to say words.
No, I mean, I think it's totally fine for these pieces to occupy a similar lane that, for example, Helmet Lang has for the past 5-ish years or so. Like, it's okay to be an like premium / entry level luxury accessible way into this kind of military earthy kind of look.
Industrial,
you know what I mean? Like, there's
something.
There's space for that, I think.
Yeah, I guess like I never read a criticism of the clothes or the brand. At least talking about Yeezy season, because everything, to Entire Studios' credit, they've been seemingly getting kind of positive, like kind of energy. Like
I think so.
Boutiques, they're being carried by multiple places. It could just be because that sells, but it doesn't seem like nobody's trying to dunk on them. At least from
not that I've
seen. What was I saying? I'm so
I kind of want to go. I want to go because there are things that are receiving some criticism, I would say.
Yes.
And that is the association to Yeezy itself. Like, I don't know if maybe Entire Studios has separated themselves enough that they're kind of insulated from that. But here's a really interesting one that you sent me that I'd love to dive into, which is this
Dive.
article about Dublin.
Double. W.
And they put out this balloon bomber here that is
Yeezy
very similar.
Gap-esque.
Yeezy Gap, right?
Yes.
I don't know if they include pictures of the Yeezy Gap jacket or if it's further down here, but it's
I think
it's
they include. Yeah, you can scroll.
incredibly similar. They talk a lot about Doublet, how much this writer loves Doublet. They're doing great work. I agree, by the way. I think
Yeah.
Doublet's fantastic, but they say I couldn't help but notice the similarities between this jacket and the Yeezy Gap round jacket seen right here on Kanye West in black.
Mhm.
But this is like the key one, the key
This is the
paragraph.
key.
I firmly believe that all similarities here are coincidental to be clear. Doublet's jacket is also available in Yeezy-friendly black and very uneasy green, but the Doublet and Yeezy Gap jackets both share a similar wide and cropped shape. So there's all of the
Much to do.
much to do about Doublet and working as hard as it can to put away like, yeah, it's similar, but it's not the same at all, guys.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the jackets are a little different. I think that
Yeah.
we need to get a reality check that most clothes are pretty similar to other clothes, and
Yes.
they're only slightly different from other clothes, which
Mhm.
doesn't take away from any of the merit of designers. But I mean, there's a million. That looks a lot like an Alpha Industries jacket to my simple brain.
Ooh.
And also like the Yeezy Gap one was probably actually designed by Demna or his team, right?
100%.
And we think he's a good designer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
have we decided against that?
Well, let's go back. People may not realize this, and I wanted to hit it at some point. Looking back, and you might be able to throw more names into this mix, but going back to even the earliest days of Yeezy season, you're talking about Kanye recruiting Demna
Mhm.
Gvasalia from Balenciaga, Jerry Lorenzo from Fear of God. There was
Virgil was probably involved.
Virgil Abloh of Off-White. Early seasons, John Elliott was apparently a big help. It was like the big name designers gone on to do big name things, oftentimes similar to Yeezy season or
Mhm.
derivative or clearly inspiring later. Like it's a lot of
Bing
very
Bing Pop.
respected designers. Is
Yeah,
what I'm trying to
yeah.
say.
So it's like it wasn't like there was a dearth of talent.
Right.
Um Yeah, I don't know. And one of the other things is a million years ago, I made a video, and the last video I made, I think in maybe June, I
Mhm.
interviewed a designer who has his own brand, Bobby Cabbage,
Mhm.
and his one of his kind of accolades is or experiences was that he worked on Yeezy season. He worked on one of the seasons, and I like his work. I think that his pieces were super cool when I got to see
Mhm.
them in real life. I think that he has a lot of interesting perspectives, and I think he's going places. I can see this kid going places. Um,
I prefer his stuff to the entire studio stuff on the
uh,
whole.
well, it is different, but I guess my point is that I can see the relationship of the Yeezy design in his designs. Like
Oh,
he admitted that it definitely influenced him. But my point being that he's obviously trying more things, and we're only looking at a few pieces. But I had really cool stuff like with magnetic buttons that he sent me. The
mhm.
the vest is obviously a derivative of Helmet Lang, but the way that he did like his vest, I think is really cool. It
Mhm.
is just the cut of it, the way that the weird Velcro stuff. There's just cool stuff going on. And my point is
Mhm.
this: I see merit in this new designer exploring in that space
Yeah,
that I don't think can be so easily kind of disregarded by elitists, fashion
right.
elitists. Um,
I have one point that I think goes into that I would love to explore with you for a second
for me.
because there's this brand that actually folded pretty recently called
Uh-huh.
ILYSM. I love you so
Yeah.
much. They basically only ever launched one product, which was a like tabby sock shoe right
Yeah.
here I own them. There's one of my favorite pairs of shoes. And the designer came from Yeezy, did sneakers with Yeezy. And this was a great pair of shoes. I love it. But then there is this article that was quite recent. So he tried to come back after all his controversies for a season 10 show, which this High Somebody writer attended. And there were a couple points that I really wanted to call out here. Okay. So he goes on to describe it for a while, but they start talking about these t-shirts that were worn here. The free and Yeezy free, by the way, referred to the skin-tight white t-shirts that were given to attendees free of charge. They looked as good as you'd imagine they would, which is to say, not good. And then, similarly, the sock sneakers that Ye himself has been wearing as of late were also seen at the show, looking about as good as you'd think soulless sneakers would look, which is the same insult as the paragraph above.
High Somebody, obviously, they wrote this prior to seeing my video. We all know that they steal my ideas.
Right.
Soulless shoes is actually the wave of the future. But
and by the way, these shoes look incredibly similar to these shoes that came out a couple years earlier even, and I think we're clearly informed by each other, and they're fantastic shoes. And they are clearly writing this article out of an understandable disdain for the person who is Ye. But
the person who is.
I think I'm just trying to make the point that there is an absurd amount of emotion that is caught up in this entire subject and how people are viewing both Ye, the designs, and the designers who maybe worked with him, that is really tough to untangle.
Yeah. I just had a thought in my head, in the future, kids won't, if I would, in 2015, Kanye West was considered the coolest dressed person on earth.
Yeah.
And anything he did was like gold. It was like, it was a savant. And they'll go, "You mean that Nazi who was president?" And, it's just, I feel like I experienced something culturally that won't be recorded well, in the history books.
Not at all. Not at all.
I agree with you in saying that I think maybe that's the corn kernel of this whole conversation, is that there's so much bias in this cut. There's so much kind of emotional and not necessarily objective analysis of Yeezy and the brands since the launch, that I think that it has always been kind of a conflicting thing for the brainiacs who write or think about or talk about the stuff to actually kind of place somewhere, because it has always been wrought. It has always been a difficult thing for people to kind of pin down whether or not, is this good? Is it bad? Now it's bad. Or,
right. And that's the weird thing. I don't know. Do we need to say it? We think that Ye, the person and his use, we think that's bad. We think the things he did and said are bad. We don't agree with him. We have not seen anything as of yet that shows that he deserves our forgiveness. Okay, let's take all that for granted, accept it, that's how we feel as normal people, as you should. And then let's look at what's left.
To clarify, the thing that he said was bad was "I love Hitler." The thing that he did was bad was Donda. He did that. Deeply offended.
No cap,
guys. No caps. We didn't even talk about Utopia in this episode.
We sure didn't.
So when everything else is gone, what's left? I don't know. Maybe you guys should just think that's lame and keep buying stupid Chrome Hearts, and maybe all the stuff that I want to buy will become better priced. Maybe
Great
that's
question. I am curious. There must be a tracker somewhere that's that tracks Yeezy values as a whole over time. I don't necessarily care about the sneakers. I'd be curious about the apparel, though.
Yeah.
Though
I also thought the sneakers were cool.
Yeah, they're good. They're
I
good.
like this stuff. And you know what? I only saw it because I have like just going on Pinterest, but I saw something like the litter Yeezy sneaker stuff that I never saw. Like, it's not like the 305, 350 or the
Right.
other ones. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. That's like, I think that if Ye had ever been good about anything, it was he was able to find people who really had their finger on the pulse, and he said, "Come here and make this for me." That has
Yeah.
been his skill, and
And for such a kind of I don't know, not to be like insensitive, like schizophrenic type of personality, like all over the place and unpredictable. Um, very, very clear vision in terms of his brand and his style for both the apparel and the sneakers. Like there was a through line from season to season and drop
yeah,
to drop uh, that even some like real designers don't quite achieve, you know? And that's
straight up,
interesting.
straight up, it's lit. And there's a lot of reasons why that could be the case. This was a very rich man making clothes,
And
and
we've talked about this a little bit, but John brings up the point that very recently Adidas made $500 million selling the Yeezys, the overstock Yeezys. So
that's right.
people still like Yeezy sneakers. And I think that's actually really interesting and something that I would not have expected, that it seems like people, at least in this case, are willing and able to separate Ye and Yeezy. I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, yeah. Porsche made tanks for the Nazis.
Sure.
Boss made clothes for the Nazis.
Damn right.
Mercedes Benz made Hitler's favorite car. Think of a German brand.
Volkswagens are good though. Volkswagens all
Well,
ethically great, right?
the people's car, and the people Hitler came up with them.
And the diesel cars that they made, they were
And
built for
I will,
missions.
and
They
I
didn't
will,
see anything.
and yeah, you get it. Can we discouple them? Maybe we can, and maybe we should. Maybe that's my
Really?
point. Like, listen, the guy has gone mad with power,
Mhm.
and now he's hanging out with real losers in situations that look so ugly and boring and kind of depressing. Like there was that
Yeah.
picture at a mall, and it's like, dude, I am not a celebrity. I have no clout or money, and I
Yeah.
have made it a mission in my life to avoid places that look that depressing to me. And
So are you familiar at all with Nick Fuentes?
only
Only
vis-a-vis I was doing my Kanye video, so
right.
I know
So
that he's white
it's
supremacist.
it puts the sadness into such stark relief for Ye when you know who Nick Fuentes is, because like this is a literal Nazi who spends his days like in a button down shirt on a literal probably D tier live streaming site called Cozy, just like dog whistling to a group of like 100 hardcore alt right kids. You know what I mean? Like it's the definition of sadness, and the fact that that's what Ye latched onto
It's like,
is
dude,
honestly, I don't quite understand how it happened.
yeah,
I'd like to see the documentary, the Genius episode about that
yeah, yeah,
personally.
exactly. It is it's a kind of thing where you sometimes worry that this person who you've admired and have thought like, oh, they have a vision and they're cool, when they start doing stuff like this where it's like that was the best white supremacist you would come up with who was cool, like that's like that doesn't seem like a good get. That seems like a shit get.
Yeah,
um
sure does.
it does.
So, we gotta end the episode. The final moral of the story,
Is
just don't if you're gonna pick a Nazi, don't pick such a crappy one
Yeah, and then
to
there's a
latch
video of
on
him
to.
picking his nose,
Yeah,
so
lowest
there's
of the
that.
low.